The year is 1992. Batman Returns just released. Denmark shocked the world by winning the Euros. And most importantly, Barney and Friends first aired. It was also a pretty big year for gaming. Zelda: Link to the Past finally released outside Japan. Mortal Kombat changed how we viewed games. And Final Fantasy introduced a new, fantastical world. A smaller, less spoken about release also snuck under the radar. However, one that would have a massive influence on not just games going forwards, but technology as we knew it.
And that game was Mario Paint. Directed by Hirofumi Masuoka and developed by Nintendo R&D and Intelligent Systems, known for making games such as Mario Bros, Metroid and SimCity.
The game's key premise was to be used as a creative platform for people of all ages to create anything from art to music. However, the game soon became more than that. In the time before easily accessible creative tools like Adobe products or Logic Pro, there was no real way for consumers to create art digitally or music on a PC or console. Mario Paint changed that. A key reason was accessibility. With PCs at the time costing around $1,000, not many households could afford one. But with the SNES being reduced to around $100 at the time of Mario Paint's release, and with the game costing under $60, it was a cheap alternative. But why does Mario Paint exist? In a time when more violence and action games were becoming popular, why did Nintendo make an art-based game? In the early 90s, parents started to grow concerned with the number of games their children were playing, and couldn't see any benefits to their children playing them. Likes of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter were seen to encourage violence, and games like Zelda were also combat focused, with violence being present in many games.
Due to the mounting pressure to make more educational games, the backlash and negative PR, Nintendo felt they needed to make more educational games to please parents. Therefore, the green light was given for a new educational game, one that would not only be educational, but would also be fun. These games are often known as edutainment games, and despite Nintendo's previous attempts being fruitless, with edutainment games selling poorly in the past, this time it would be different.
Originally set to just be an art and animation tool, Nintendo felt they needed to use a recognisable character to help promote the game. Much like today, in the early 90s, Mario was incredibly popular. He was everywhere. His face being on something was a sure way to make sure it sold well. Thus, Mario Paint was born.
Mario Paint is a music, art and animation tool, and for many it was their first experience using anything like it, and inspired a generation of musicians, artists and animators. One fan described the game as a creative tool for people who've probably never used a creative tool before, and that's exactly what it was intended to be.
In Nintendo's marketing campaign, they said, send your kids to art, music and film school for only $59.95. This is indicative of how Nintendo wanted it to be. It was a cheap way for children to learn these skills, and apparently many parents agreed. Mario Paint is the 18th best-selling SNES game of all time, with many people today saying the game has inspired them and their careers. Mario Paint was packaged with an SNES mouse. This was the first instance of a mouse being used for a console game. Nintendo stated in a press release that Mario Paint and mouse will open doors for a new array of exciting learning games. The mouse enabled players to be far more precise with what they made, and enabled far more possibilities, and further made the game seem like a viable alternative and entry point to its PC counterparts. When booting up the game, the title screen was interactive, with Mario running away from the cursor, and clicking on him would start the game. This gave players a chance to get used to using a mouse. Clicking on each letter would also have a different response, showing off parts of the game. When loading the game, it showed animations and art that could be made in the game. There wasn't much of a tutorial, and players were encouraged to experiment and see what they could do. Although fairly limited, there was a lot you could do. Players had 30 colours to choose from, and many stamps of iconic Nintendo items and characters. However, players could create their own stamps, creating even more possibilities, allowing them to be creative.
There is a common saying that limitation fosters creativity, and Mario Paint is a brilliant example of that.
The music section is limited, especially by today's standards, with limits on the length, how many notes you could have at once, and more. Yet, that hasn't stopped players from creating many songs. The animation section was also limited, with the biggest canvases only having 4 frames. With players only being able to save one project, it was difficult to animate much. Yet players have created short films and music videos entered at festivals, yet that wasn't the only content in the game. There was a mini-game called Gnat Attack, where players were tasked with squashing insects whilst improving their proficiency using a mouse. There was also a colouring book section, where you were given pre-drawn images to colour in. For a 30-year-old game, there was a lot of content. The success of Mario Paint made it a sensation, with being a big part of many childhoods. It also has a massive impact in the gaming industry. The introduction of a mouse for the SNES meant more PC ports came to the system. As well, many games tried to replicate Mario Paint's success, with Nintendo's bitter rivals trying to replicate its success with Sega's Wacky World Creativity Studio. But living up to Mario Paint was a tough feat, as Sega failed. Even Nintendo couldn't live up to its previous success, with a Mario Paint inspired game, Mario Artist Paint Studio, releasing for the Nintendo 64 in 1999.
Mario Artist Paint Studio was an 8-part game and art software based on art and animation. However, it was a massive failure, with only 4 of 8 parts making it to store shelves. However, since then, Mario Paint has been referenced in all sorts of ways, from TV to game.
In 2009, WarioWare DIY released, with developers saying Mario Paint was a massive inspiration, even with Gnat Attack returning. However, Mario Paint has inspired many more games, with the Mario Maker series originally intended to be a Mario Paint sequel, and Undertale even using sound from Mario Paint. One developer who worked on Mario Maker said, Mario Paint without a doubt made him who he is today, and that's the case for many kids who grew up playing the game. Even 30 years on, Mario Paint is still relevant, with videos about the game still getting tens and hundreds of thousands of views, and even occasionally millions.
The game still has a massive community, with it still being streamed on Twitch and having a Reddit community. To be relevant 30 years later is a massive achievement and must be something special. The game not only influenced games and franchises, but also influenced a generation of children, changing their lives forever.